The crunch of gravel beneath my tires seemed louder than ever as I pulled up to the old Victorian house that had once been a warm, welcoming beacon of my childhood. Hallowbrook had never felt like home after Dad vanished without a trace. Now, with Mom gone too, the town felt like a prison of unanswered questions. I stepped out of the car, the chill of the evening air biting at my skin, and took in the sprawling two-story monstrosity that I had inherited. It had been painted a sad shade of blue that was peeling in places, exposing the raw, unpainted wood beneath. The house looked tired, almost relieved to have me back, as if it had been holding on to secrets for too long. As I pushed open the heavy oak door, the scent of dust and decay filled my nostrils. The floorboards groaned underfoot, the sound resonating through the eerily silent hallways. The house was just as I remembered, large, foreboding, and filled with hidden nooks and crannies that had always held a fascination for me. Now, they just seemed like perfect hiding spots for the shadows that had claimed it. The grand staircase swept up before me, the banister worn smooth from generations of hands that had gripped it in fear or desperation. The first night back was a restless one, plagued by dreams so vivid they felt like reality. I saw Mom, her eyes wide with terror, her mouth moving as if she was speaking, but no sound came out. She was trying to tell me something, but her words were lost to the fog of sleep. When I woke, the digital clock on the nightstand read 3:14 a.m., the exact time of Dad's disappearance. My heart hammered in my chest as I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the coldness of the floor seeping through my socks. I knew I wouldn't be getting any more rest that night. The house was eerily quiet as I padded downstairs, the only sound the occasional tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. The moon cast a ghostly glow through the windows, painting the dusty furniture in silvery light. I found myself drawn to the basement door, which had been sealed shut for as long as I could remember. The house was whispering secrets, and I had to know what was down there. With trembling hands, I managed to pry it open, revealing a set of rickety stairs that descended into darkness. I flicked on the flashlight app on my phone and took a deep breath before stepping down into the unknown. The air grew colder, and the smell of mildew and earth grew stronger. At the bottom, I saw that the basement had been sectioned off into small, claustrophobic rooms. One door in particular caught my eye. It had been boarded up with crude wooden planks, and there was something about it that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Gwen had mentioned the abandoned hospital, and the next day, I decided to check it out. The building loomed over the town, its windows shattered and ivy-covered, a grim reminder of the lives it had once contained. The inside was a maze of corridors, each one more desolate than the last. The walls whispered secrets of the past, and I could almost hear the echoes of footsteps that had long since faded away. It was there, in the dusty archives, that I found a newspaper article from the 1950s about a series of unexplained disappearances. Each person had been last seen near the very house I now inhabited. The article spoke of a group called the Overseers, a name that sent a shiver down my spine. Detective Pierce had agreed to meet me at the library to discuss the case further. His eyes held a haunted look, as if he too knew more than he was willing to admit. As we pored over dusty tomes and yellowed documents, he spoke in hushed tones about the town's dark history. Hallowbrook had been the site of a government-run research facility that experimented with lucid dreaming and interdimensional travel. The project was shut down after several researchers had gone mad, and the hospital was converted into a makeshift prison for those deemed too dangerous to live among the townspeople. The librarian, Mrs. Fletcher, had been a friend of my mother's. Her eyes grew wide when she saw me, and she whispered, "You need to leave, Elena. You don't know what you're getting into." But I was too far gone to heed her warning. My father's journal was my compass, and it pointed straight to the heart of the town's nightmare. The entries grew more frantic, detailing strange rituals and a creature that dwelt beneath the earth, feeding on the fear of the townsfolk. The Overseers, he wrote, were the town's guardians, keeping the creature at bay. But at what cost? The night grew thick with tension, and my dreams grew more intense. I saw shadows flitting at the edge of my vision, always just out of reach. They whispered my name, their voices a chorus of malicious intent. I knew I was getting closer to the truth, but the closer I got, the more I feared what I might find. The house was a labyrinth of secrets, and I was about to face the Minotaur at its center. The question was, would I be able to escape with my sanity intact? The boarded-up door in the basement beckoned to me, a silent challenge that I couldn't ignore. With Gwen and Detective Pierce by my side, we ventured into the bowels of the house. The air was stale, the weight of the earth above pressing down on us. The walls were lined with strange symbols, an ancient language that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. The whispers grew louder, the shadows more substantial. We had stumbled upon the Overseer's lair. My father's journal had led us to a chamber filled with candles and an ancient tome, its pages yellowed with age. The book was open to a page with a symbol that matched the ones etched into the floor. It was a map of the tunnels beneath Hallowbrook, a labyrinth that stretched under the town, connecting the house to the abandoned hospital and beyond. The detective studied the pages with a mix of fascination and horror, his hand tracing the lines as if they were a map to our doom. Gwen's hand was cold and clammy in mine as we descended into the tunnels. The air grew colder, the walls seemingly closing in with each step. The whispers grew clearer, taunting us in a language I didn't understand, but somehow knew was speaking of fear and control. The flashlight's beam danced on the walls, throwing eerie shadows that twisted and turned, following us like silent sentinels. We found ourselves in a vast chamber, the ceiling lost in darkness. Above us, the ground rumbled, a heartbeat that seemed to resonate with the very earth itself. The center of the chamber held an altar, stained with what I didn't dare to think about. The air was thick with a presence, something ancient and angry. It was here, in this place of dark worship, that we faced Mrs. Lancaster. Her eyes burned with a fierce intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. She was the head of the overseers, the one who had been pulling the strings all along. "You think you can save this town, Elena?" she sneered. "You're just a girl playing with forces you can't comprehend." Her words were like a slap in the face, but I stood my ground. "What have you done to my father?" I demanded. Her smile was cold, devoid of any warmth or pity. "He served his purpose," she said, her voice echoing around the chamber. "As will you, if you dare to continue down this path." With a flick of her wrist, the shadows grew longer, reaching out to grab us. The fight against the overseers was a blur of adrenaline and terror. We dodged their grasping forms, trying to find a way to break the hold they had on the town. The air grew thick with the scent of burning candles and fear as we stumbled upon the heart of the ritual, a crystal that pulsed with a sickly light. It was the key to the creature's power, the reason for the town's curse. As we approached the crystal, the whispers grew to a cacophony, the shadows solidifying into a wall of nightmares. Gwen and Detective Pierce fought valiantly, their eyes never leaving mine as we faced the darkness together. I reached out and touched the crystal, feeling its power surge through me. It was cold, like the touch of death itself. But as I grasped it, something shifted. The whispers grew quiet, the shadows retreated, and for a brief moment, I knew what it was to be in control. Mrs. Lancaster's eyes widened in shock and she screamed, a sound that seemed to rip through the very fabric of reality. The crystal began to crack under my touch, the light dimming. With a final surge of strength, I shattered it, sending shards flying in every direction. The room erupted in a burst of light, and when it faded, the overseers were gone. The darkness receded, leaving us standing in the silence of the chamber, the earth no longer trembling beneath our feet. We emerged from the tunnels, the sun rising over Hallowbrook. The town looked different somehow, less oppressive, as if a great weight had been lifted. The house was still there, but the shadows no longer watched me from the corners. Gwen and Detective Pierce were exhausted but relieved. We had done it. We had freed Hallowbrook from the overseer's grip. But as I looked back at the house, I knew our battle was far from over. The weeks that followed were a blur of cleaning and renovation. The house had been my family's for generations, and now it was up to me to restore it. As we worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The whispers in my dreams had changed. They were no longer warnings but pleas, begging me to bring back the order the overseers had maintained. I ignored them, focusing on making the house a home again. One night, as I lay in bed, the whispers grew so loud that they woke me. I sat up, my heart racing, and heard a soft tapping at the window. Peering through the curtains, I saw a figure standing outside, human-shaped, but with eyes that burned like stars. It was my father, or what was left of him. He was one of the assimilated, a servant of the ancient entity we had unleashed. The creature beneath the town had awakened, and it was angry. People began to disappear again, and the town's fear grew palpable. I knew I had to face it, to save Hallowbrook from the horrors that now lurked beneath its streets. I gathered what was left of the overseer's artifacts, the ones that hadn't been destroyed in the fight, and descended into the tunnels once more. This time, I was ready. The chamber was now a ruin of shattered crystal and ash. The entity's power was a palpable force, a thick miasma that choked the air. As I stepped into the room, the earth trembled, and the walls began to crack. I could feel the fear of the townspeople feeding it, making it stronger. I had to end the cycle of terror. With the artifacts in hand, I performed the reversal ritual. The words were archaic, the gestures unnatural, but I knew they were right. The entity roared, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The walls of the chamber closed in, the pressure unbearable, but I held firm, channeling every ounce of anger and determination I had. Suddenly the air grew still, the pressure lifted, and the whispers grew faint. The earth stopped shaking. I had done it. I had defeated the creature and freed Hallowbrook from the overseer's control. But at what cost? As I climbed out of the tunnels and into the light of day, I saw Gwen and Detective Pierce waiting for me. They were safe. But the town was forever changed. The whispers in my dreams had stopped. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw the creature's eyes, now filled with a desperate hunger. Had I really won? Or had I simply become the new overseer? The house no longer felt like a prison, but I couldn't escape the feeling that I was now its warden.